I will skip over the normal spiel since we are a few minutes over. So, if you want, I'll just take a moment to introduce you. John is our presenter today, and we're using our Anywhere platform. I can see that everyone has learned very well how to use that chat feature. So, please feel free to ask any questions in this chat pod. And John, if you'd like to go
Sure.
ahead and
Okay.
take it
Thank
over
you.
from
So,
here.
welcome everybody. These little things are sent to try us. It's not an issue. So we'll just carry on from the webinar from here on. So, my background was I was in the Royal Air Force, aircraft engineer, and then was working with data programming. I was a data scientist, a data engineer before those terms were really coined. I didn't realize I was a data scientist until the phrase came out. I just worked with data and did stuff with statistics. I am a contractor. Since leaving the Air Force, I've been a contractor. I've contracted with LearnTree for 20 plus years. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer as well. Been a certified trainer for about 4 years. I enjoy my work with LearnTree. I enjoy contracting and doing that kind of work as well. But I'm very a great ambassador of learning, whether it's training or whether it's further training in colleges or universities or wherever. So yeah, I also enjoy giving these webinars and doing these webinars because they are a great way to get some information over quickly. Okay, so let me just move to the next slide. So the webinar is really in these four different chapters, I guess you could say. There's an introduction, then the Power BI overview, the 5 stages in a Power BI project, and then for you to ask questions afterwards. So let's move across to the Power BI overview. So it is a self-service data visualization tool, and self-service is where we try and get some control from the IT department, not trying to wrench it, but what we're trying to do is free up their time. In lots of organizations, the IT department are really busy, and we may be asking them to do some small changes, but they don't have time, but we can actually do that ourselves. Okay, and that's what self-service is about. It's not just Power BI, lots of the other tools are self-service also. Power BI Desktop is free. It's a free application. You can download the desktop version, install it on your laptop, and you can actually run it and use it. And you can save projects with it. And when you save the projects, you can actually then share them. And you can share them. I'm just checking my microphone because I can see there's a few people not hearing anything. It seems to be fine. Yeah, so when you share, uh, Yeah, so when you share it on a drive or even just sending it to someone, you're really not doing the best practice. So the best practice is to have either the Power BI server or the Power BI service to actually um, share your projects, your dashboards with. More about that in a little while. We'll talk about that in a bit. So Power BI can connect to multiple data sources. So it may be that you're connecting to a database and you're doing some work, and then your manager comes along and says, "Okay, I've got this set of data." So if we had a sales team, and then the manager says, "Okay, I've got some data where I need that combined with it." We've now got targets for the salespeople, but it's not in a database yet because the IT guys are busy and I can't get this project to have enough priority. And that's where we can do that ourselves. Okay, we can join the spreadsheet, whatever it is, merge it into our data model until we then get that data given to us in the database. I mentioned the Power BI service, so you can save your Power BI reports to the Power BI service, and that the service and the server give you secure collaboration. So if you think about anyone who's worked with Excel workbooks and worksheets will know that once a workbook gets passed around, and sometimes people change it, you never really know what workbook is the actual live workbook. And they can just proliferate. And so by saving them up to a server or a service, you're preventing this from happening. The Power BI server is installed on premises and it behaves like SSRS, which is SQL Server Reporting Services. Anyone who's used SSRS, it looks and feels and behaves the same, but it's Power BI reports, not SQL Server Reporting Services reports, although you can host those as well. So the server and the service are, so the server is behind the service in its capabilities. The service is always the better of the two, but of course not all organizations want to save to the cloud, so they use the server. Some organizations use both. They have a hybrid version. Some of their data's on a server behind their firewall, and some of the data's in the cloud outside of their control. So when we save it to the service, we can save it as a standalone report, or we can then use that report as a tile on a dashboard. And that's where one of the areas where the service is more powerful, because we can't create dashboards on the server at the moment. I'm sure we'll be able to at some point, but we can't at the moment. And you might be thinking, well, does that really matter? Well, dashboards can have reports from multiple data sources, uh, as in multiple projects, whereas the report is just from a single project. So that's the power of the server versus the service. These are the Gartner Magic Quadrants. I always show them. These are obviously the last 3 years. Gartner is an independent organization, and they provide annual reports on all sorts of technologies, including BI software. And so these are the quadrants for the last 3 years, and Microsoft have always been in the top right-hand quadrant and always above the others. In 2021, they've actually gained more space between themselves and Tableau, who are the next, always been the next closest rival, if you like, to Microsoft. Okay, so I like to show those just to show that we're talking about what I consider to be the leader in this game. And Power BI, as it says, has consistently taken the top position. So the target users for this product, and for any BI product really, we have our business intelligence analysts or specialists or super users, whatever name you want to give them. They're creating interactive reports and dashboards, okay, and sharing those with managers and other users and perhaps other super users who are part of their team. And then we have our managers who get access to the reports and the dashboards to enable them to use them to make informative and intelligent decisions, looking at current data, looking at trends, trying to figure out, what we should be selling, what we shouldn't be selling. Okay, so yeah, it's managers use it also, and then other business users who are consuming the information to enable them to do their jobs. All right, so there is a definite separation between users, although obviously the BI specialists could also be users of reports also. So let's talk about the 5 stages of a Power BI project, and then I'm just going to do some little demos in those stages so that we get a feel of what it's about. So these are the recognized set of steps that can be followed for not just a Power BI project, but a business intelligence project. We need to connect to our data, and then we need to if we've got multiple data sources, we need to connect to multiple data sources. So like I said, we might have data from a data warehouse or a database, and then we supplement that data with a CSV or with an Excel file, or maybe another database or another set of tables. So we connect to our data, and then we transform our data. Transformations are something that I talk about frequently, is that one of the things we want to do is reduce how much data comes across. So we might want to reduce the width of the data by removing columns that we don't need. We might want to reduce the height of the data by removing rows that we don't need. Often people will say, right, I might need this later, let's bring all this in. And then we never use it. And we've got lots and lots of data that's taking up disk space and performance time and slowing us down. And it's also coming across the network, so it's slowing down the network as well. Okay, so and that's simple transformations. There are some really detailed, complex transformations we can do as well. And we'll talk a little bit about those in that area. If you always have clean data, you don't need to do any transformation, but it's unusual to always have clean data. If you always have data from a single source, you don't have to do the data model, which I'm going to talk about now. So the data model is where we can bring the different data sources together, okay, and we can connect them up using keys. And again, we'll talk about that in more depth in that actual part of the webinar. And then the 4th stage, once we're happy with we've got our data, we've transformed it to make any mashup that we need of the different data sources, we've built our data model, we're happy with that. we can start to visualize our data and use the powerful visualization techniques that's available to us in Power BI, including lots of custom controls as well. Now, I'm going to talk about those a little bit to show you a couple of pitfalls and also some good aspects of it as well. And then the sharing and collaboration. And the sharing and collaboration is where we've saved it up to either the service or the server, and we've given access to our manager, our users, or whoever needs access to those reports or dashboards. Okay. So connecting to data. One of the things that we need to do is we need to discover where the data is. And depending on the type of project that we're working with, we might be the owner of the data or we might not. So typical questions, especially if it's a project where we're sat down with other users, is, who's the data owner? Who's the administrator? What types are our data sources? Is it data warehouses, databases? Is it big data? Is it Excel, CSVs? They're all valid types of data sources. So what are they? Where are those data sources? Because knowing where they are, I can then say, I need access to those. I need maybe a login to the database, or I need access to a shared file or something like that. And when do we refresh that data? How often do you need that data refreshed? We might refresh it on a daily basis. We might refresh it on a bi-daily, doing once in the morning, once in the afternoon, or maybe somebody needs it hourly or even less time than that. And how do we connect up to this data? So there are lots and lots of other relevant questions that we would ask when we're connecting to data, but these are just a few. And again, it depends on the type of project. If it's your data, you know where it is, you know how to get access to it, you know how it behaves, and you can just connect up and use it. But if it's a project where other people are involved, then we've got a bit more digging that we need to do. So typically, for a Windows application, there's multiple ways to access the data. So in Power BI, there's no difference. There's at least 3 ways. You can click data from the splash screen. You can select a button from the data section on the toolbar, or there are also buttons on the hyperlink or hyperlinks on the desktop. And we know that the list of data sources is extensive, and Microsoft are adding to that every release. They add more connectors. Okay, maybe every release is a little bit too much, but they add it frequently to many releases. And we can connect to single files, access spreadsheets like Excel. We can connect to a folder. So if we had files in a folder that all had the same structure, then we could connect up to a folder and consume all those files. We can connect to databases, big data. If we've got data in the cloud, then through Azure or AWS or any other online services like Dropbox or any of the other file storage areas, we can connect up seamlessly using Power BI to those as well. And I mentioned that data sources are continuously being added and improved. So let's just do a quick demo of Power BI here and connecting. So I'm going to fire up my Power BI desktop. Let me just do that. So bring that up. Okay, just give it a few seconds. So I've just double clicked on the Power BI icon, not this one that you can see at the bottom of the hill there. I'll talk about that one shortly, but this is the one that's updated monthly. And here comes our splash screen. So we can connect to data from here, but I just want to mention a couple of things here. So we can get data. Yeah, we can open up previous projects that we've had a look at. We can also have a look at some of the other sort of training videos that Microsoft give us, small snippets, and they're quite useful as well. And there's forums, there's a blog, all sorts of things that we can access there. I'm just going to close this, and then I'm just going to show you the other areas to load data. So we've got these buttons on the what we call the canvas. These are visible when we've got no data in the tool. As soon as I pull data in, they will disappear. And we also have the data toolbar at the top that you can see. So let me just, if I just do this, I'll be able to zoom in. So that's the data toolbar at the top. So get data, Excel workbook, etc. Power BI data sets, those are in the cloud, in the service, SQL Server. As you would expect, SQL Server takes top pull in the database for Microsoft. Okay, so let me just grab some data. So I'm going to get data, and I'm going to connect to a CSV to begin with. Okay, and let me just do this. And I'm just going to pull in this. You can paste data from a CSV, but I'm connecting to the CSV to consume the data that way. Okay, and then I'm just going to show you a couple of things here. Okay, so there it brings in the content of the CSV, and it allows me to just have a look at the data, so a data preview if you like, and then I can load it and pull it into Power BI. Okay, so just give it a few seconds and we'll have a look at it. It is applying changes. It's also telling me about some recovered files that I'll get rid of that dialog in a second. Okay, so I'm going to just close that dialog. Okay. All right, so it's cleared the buttons away. We've got a list here of our columns that are in that CSV. So now I've got some data that I can work with. I can double click on this, just like we can in Excel, and I can change its name, so customer orders. So that's now my data source. I've changed the name. And obviously it doesn't affect the data source. It's only in the Power BI project. Okay. And if I want to add more data sources to it, I can, as long as there is some way of joining them together. We'll talk about that when we get there. I can just click on an Excel workbook and I can go in and I can pull in, let's pull in this. Okay, so I could just connect up and pull in some more data sources and work with those. We'll do more data sources in more depth in a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel that. All right. So, and I know that was just a quick demo, but the point of it is just to show you how quick and easy it is to connect up to a single data source. Okay, and that's obviously the first stage of our Power BI project, get the data. All right, so let's go back to here. So hopefully you're now seeing my screen again. So let me just do that. Okay. So transformation of the data. So there's times when our data is just not in a format suitable to visualize. It's just not ready for us. We can get some really dirty data. And a lot of the data I've worked in the past has needed extensive work on it before it was in any shape for us to actually work with. So if you think of all the work that data analysts do in tools like Excel, they work with the VBA, the Visual Basic for Applications language, or they'll use functions, or they'll do VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs, and they'll get their data in a particular format that they need it before they can actually do any modeling work with it. And we can do that in Power BI, but it's just a lot more easily done. We also have some preparatory work that's often done in other tools like the SQL language. So, and that's actually a good topic as well, because if we're doing some preparatory work before we connect to the data, then we're not doing the processing in Power BI. Okay, and if we're doing a sort before we bring the data in, if that's the order we want it to be sorted in, we've done that external to the product. And sometimes that's a good way to do it. So this is the transformation. Is we're carrying out some work similar to what people do with tools like SSIS, which is another one of the Microsoft BI stack. So I mentioned SSRS. That came in with SQL Server in 2005. SSIS is also one of the BI stack. There's also SSAS, which we won't be talking about. But SSIS is integration services. You connect up to multiple data sources, you make your transformations, and then your data is ready to be used. And that's what we're doing in Power BI as well. And so I make this comment here that if your data is 100% clean and ready to visualize, you don't need to do any of that. And, lucky you. But experience does dictate to me that it's unlikely that this is going to be the case. Okay, there's usually quite a bit of work that we need to do beforehand. There's other reasons for such work. So you could compare it, what we're doing, in a high level way to be similar to what we do to produce or update the content of a data warehouse. It's certainly not a data warehouse, but we can build those types of tools. And I just make this point at the bottom that without clean data, there's no artificial intelligence, there's no data science, there's no business intelligence, and there's no Internet of Things. There's just dirty data impacting decision making and people's production. Okay, it takes all of your time or a lot of your time. Okay, so yeah, we need to do this data transformation to make sure that we've got our data how we want it to be before we start doing our visualization. So Power BI uses a tool called Power Query Editor or Power Query. It's also in Excel, it's in the later versions of Excel. But Power Query allows us to make these changes, and it uses a language called the M language. But at an introductory level, we don't have to learn the M language because Power Query creates it for us. It's a really powerful language, and you can do some really powerful analysis with it, some powerful work with M. But we've got a lot to learn when we first visit Power BI, and we've got to get the data, we've got to transform it, and we'll see the other stages shortly. So if we don't have to learn M to begin with, that's a useful thing. Some of the power of Power Query is data profiling. So where we can actually, and data profiling is something that we do prior to working with data. We need to understand a bit more about our data before we work with it. We can also format our data. So for instance, would be a report in Excel where someone has actually formatted it to be a nice report. It's got pictures, it's got headings, but we want that data. We want to use that data in Power BI. So we can grab that data, we can work with it and use that as a data source. I mentioned reducing the number of rows in your project, removing columns from your project. And again, it's an important thing to say to people who are new to this arena. If I remove columns and I remove rows, I'm not removing them from the data source. I'm just removing them from the project, the Power BI project. We can do some really advanced things as well, like merge queries. And we can merge them similar to joins in SQL. So we can actually merge and bring in other columns so that we've got a single table with multiple columns. Or we can append queries, which is similar to a union in SQL, where, for instance, we've got 5 files from 5 different offices giving us their data for the week, but we want to report on a single file, so we can actually append all those queries together, so we've got a single table. We can do pivoting, unpivoting, and combining our data as well. So unpivoting is where we make our data, change it from being columns to rows. We turn it into a more usable set of data. And we'll see that. I'll do a little bit of that when we get to that demo, which is shortly. Okay, so let me go back to our share. Okay, and I'm going to just close this. And I'm going to open up a different Power BI. I'm not going to save it. So I'm just going to double click on Power BI again. Notice I've got 2 versions. If we've got time, I'll talk about this one that says RS, but we're going to use the standard version. RS is for report server, slightly less capable than the monthly updated version. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of demos here. I'm going to pull in just a Excel workbook that's got multiple sheets. We saw it briefly. I'm not going to do any data model work just now. We'll do that shortly. And then I'll pull in a file which is a Excel formatted report. So let me just get rid of this and click on Excel. Use this button here, Eastwind Customers. It's the one I want. So Eastwind is an old Microsoft tool, old Microsoft demo database. I like it because it's got a nice straightforward set of connections that people can understand. So if you can work with ordering from Amazon, you can really understand how this works. So we've got customers. Customers place an order. So there's my orders table. Orders can consist of many lines. If I'm visiting Amazon, often I buy more than one product. So therefore, my order has to have the ability to have multiple lines. I also need to know what product is in that order. Click on that. And notice as well that the tables have not got very good names. That's on purpose. That's generally what happens. You get something that's really what you think is poorly named, um, and we want to be able to change it. So now I'm going to click on transform data. So that opens up a query, and then I'll make Power Query full screen so that it fills that screen. Okay, so this is going to be quite a quick demo. All right, so let me just go back to Power Query. It switched it out. So there's Power Query. I've got all my tables here, and this is where I tend to, if I've got lots of tables to rename, this is where I tend to do it, because I can just get into this text box and I can just rename them really quickly. So I've just called that customers. All I'm doing is highlighting and deleting the text that I don't want. And you might have, if you're using a data warehouse, you might have something that says dim, you might have something that says fact in front of it. But for our users, we might not want to use that terminology because it can be quite technical. So let's do that. Okay, so if I go back to customers, and let me move that control. You probably can't see that, but I'm just moving something out of my way. So if I drag across, we've got some data here, and I'm not going to use address, so I'm just going to right click and remove it. Now well, actually after I do it, notice I had a bit of profiling there. So if I go to my view menu, I've got some profiling options set up. I'll select them all actually. So this is profiling that I mentioned. I can now get a feel of my data. I can see, if I come across to here, that all of these are full, they're all valid, okay? And if I come to here, it says 93 distinct, 93 unique. Let me just zoom in on that for you. So that tells me it's a key field because it's got 93 customers in there, and so it's distinct. They're all distinct, which is how we'd expect it to be. So that's my primary key. Then I've got other fields, and as I come along, we'll see that region has got 90 or 67% empty. So again, that's a good thing. Why is it empty? It might be that we're just not getting the data, but it's a useful thing to know. Same as postal code, we've got 1% empty for postal code here as well. Okay, so and when I click on one of these, so let me click on postal code. All right, so it gives me some information about it. Now, some of the information is not useful because it's categorical type data, it's descriptive data, but some of it is. So let me go to orders, and let me go to order date. Okay, so there it gives me my min date 47, and I just need to put my cursor over there so you can see it. 4796, and my max date 6598. So that's the dates in my range, and it's useful to know that when you're dealing with data. Sometimes, not all the time, but so it gives me that information, but it gives me a lot of information. If I choose something that is, let me find something. Oh, let me go to order details. Okay, I'm choosing something that's numeric, like unit price. So I get some numerical type statistics here. It tells me there are 113 distinct entries, and then it gives me the min, it gives me the max, it gives me the average, the standard deviation. So if you're after statistical information about your columns as part of your study, then you've got it there. Okay, so that is the data preview and the data profiling. So I'm just going to turn those off. So let's do that. Okay. So this is where I would remove columns that I don't want, and I would delete rows that I don't want. I can change data types. So for instance, unit price, it says 1.2. Okay, so that's cool, but maybe I want it to behave like it's a currency. So I can select fixed decimal number, change that, and it now behaves like a currency. I can format it back in Power BI, but I just change the data types in Power Query. Okay, I can make this behave like a percentage rather than 0.05. So let's do that. So now it's 5%. So I'm just changing how the data type is. It detects the data type when you pull the data in, but I've got the power to change it. Okay, and then once you've finished, so for instance here, quantity per unit, I don't need that, so I'll remove that. Remove the columns that you don't want, remove the rows that you don't want, and then you go and you say close and apply, and it then brings your changes into Power BI. And so what happens now is every time I open this up, it goes through the Power Query process. We won't see it, but any changes that I've made in Power Query, it then applies before the data comes back into Power BI Desktop. Okay, so just give this a few seconds. It'll load up. There we go. Okay, so there's my 4 tables or queries, data sources, whatever you want to think of them as, and they're in there now. Okay, so I'm going to keep this one open because we'll come back to that, save me pulling it all in again. But I'll just open up another Power BI. Then I'm going to connect to an Excel report. Okay, again, give it a few seconds. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this in. Okay, so it is in an Excel, so let's get some data. I'll just choose Excel. So it's called sales by products. Here we go. So we pull that in, and then you'll see the problems once we open it, because the data preview will show us certain things, and I'll just talk about it. We'll pull it in, we'll do some transformations, and then we'll save it back. Okay, so sales data per year. Okay, so there are a number of headings. So you can see here we've got Eastwind Traders. Okay, there are a number of rows that are empty. There's lots of nulls there. Here are my column names way down here, category name and product name. I've got some data underneath, which is fine. And as I bring this down, I've got some more nulls in there. So I really need to do some sort of transformation to clear that out. I don't want to do it in Excel because that's somebody's report. You know, they use that report, but I want the data. I want to work with the data in Power BI. So let's click on Transform Data. Let it get back into Power Query. And we'll have a look at a few things that we can do. Okay, so just as an example, because obviously on webinars we don't have time to do loads of stuff. So let me get my Power Query, there it is there. Okay, so looking at this, I want to get rid of the top 13 rows of data from 1 to 13. So I can remove rows, I can remove top rows, and I'll just put in there. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to put 20 in. I'm going to click OK. And I've deleted some of my data, and I've also deleted the headings, the field names. Not what I wanted to do, but I just wanted to show you that anything that we do over here, this X, I'm in the applied steps area. Let me just zoom in on that so you can see exactly where I am. So where it says remove top rows, that's where I am at the moment. Okay. So when I click on this X, it will delete it and revert back. Or I can click on the cog and it will let me change it. Okay. So instead of 20, I want 13. Click OK. So it's created in such a way to help us out, to make things easy for you. If you make a mistake, it's quite easy to renew and redo. So we've got rid of those. We know as well that there are a number of rows at the bottom. So there's 3 rows at the bottom that I don't want. I don't want to double account, so I've got to get rid of those totals. So again, I just remove rows, remove bottom rows, and we'll get rid of them. Click on OK. And that's it. That's my those transformations done. We've got a problem in that our column names have not promoted themselves. So we can say use first row as headers. So once we got rid of those 13 rows of data, we can promote these up to be headers. So now I've got my headers there. Okay, so I'm going to do one more thing and then we'll come back into Power Query and we'll make another transformation. So let me save this to Power BI. I'm going to close and apply it. It'll just bring it in. So what we've got is we've got a some data. Okay, we've got years of information, and there's a few ways we could model this. There's a few ways we could work with it. We could actually just use the data as it is. So we could have year, 3 years, and we could work with those. The problem we've got is, So let me just drop this down. So if I put in my category name, so when you click on a piece of data that is text, it creates a table. And I will zoom in on this, okay? And then if I want to, I could then put product name in as well, okay? And then I can start to put the years in. So this little icon here is the zoom icon or the focus mode. So let me focus in on that so we can see it a bit easier. I could quite easily change the font size, but this is a quicker way of doing it. So now if I want to know all of my, how much did we sell overall, I've got a bit of a problem because my data's split into 3 separate years. I can get 3 years worth, and okay, I can total these up, and I could use the DAX language to create a column that totaled them all up and then use that. But then what happens in 2017? I then have to, do I amend that calculation? Do I create a new calculation? What happens if our manager says, I want the last 2 years? We have to create another calculation. And that's where pivoting the data comes in and it becomes a bit easier to do. We can, of course, filter data out. We can, of course, use slicers. For those of you who've used Excel, you can get a slicer, but you still have the same issue with totals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this zoom. I'm going to go to transform data. That takes me back to Power Query. And I'm just going to do a quick transformation here. Because what we've got is we've got our data in columns, but really we need it in rows. So I'm going to select these headings for the years. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to say pivot, unpivot columns is what I want. So now it's taken those and it's unpivoted them. So now they are in row type format. I'm going to make this year. I'm going to make this total. And I'm going to then close and apply. Okay, so let that come through. This will break, and it will break. I've done that on purpose because we no longer have those 3 years. But if I just remove those by clicking on the X, I can then click on year, okay, and I can click on total. So now I've got down at the bottom the total for all 3 years. Okay, so, and we can, as I said, we could come in here and we could actually say where it says year is all, we've got filtering capability. So I can just say, okay, I want 2014. So now I've got the total for 2014. Or we can use a slicer, which I've got here. So let me just click on there, click on the slicer. Okay, drag year onto the slicer. Okay, so we've got a number of boxes. I'm just going to go to format. I'm going to go to general. I'm going to change that to be horizontal. And then I get some boxes. So now it looks more like a reasonable slicer. So instead of textual, it's now using buttons. Okay, so we've now got a slicer there that I can choose all the years or just one of the years or both. So we gain by unpivoting that data. Okay. All right, so I think that's enough of a demo from here. Because I'm late into the webinar, I've totally lost track of time, so I'm just going to keep going along. Okay. Right, the data model. So the data model is where we bring multiple data sources and we bring them together, we connect them up. So if you get your data from a single source like Excel or CSV, you may currently not need to think about a data model because you're just pulling it in, okay? But if we then, like I mentioned, we get some data for the sales team who have got a KPI to meet, we can integrate that. Okay, so that's the manager provides us an Excel worksheet with targets. We can integrate those in. Okay, and there's lots of other reasons we might do it. We even bought a company. Our organization has merged with another company. We've got their data. We've got to bring it in somehow, but it's not in our databases or data sources yet. So we've got Excel data or some other database where it needs to come in. So we need to understand how a data model works. And again, we're not going into really complex data modeling here. Okay, we're talking just at a really high level. So if you've got an understanding of VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP in Excel, you'll know that you'll need some sort of primary key, and you've got to connect the two together to then get the data where you want it. And that's really what we're talking about here. So our Excel workbook, yeah, it's got multiple sheets that need to be joined. I pulled in customers, orders, order details, and products. We'll have a look at those in the model very shortly. It could be that your data is coming from a relational database. So in that case, you may well have multiple tables that you need to connect to get the data. Or it could be coming from multiple sources, as we've mentioned. And if you're getting your data from a data mart or a data warehouse, you're going to be connecting up to tables, like it could be a sales table and then dimension tables that support that sales table. Okay. And then a real good reason for learning this is to further your capability as a data analyst. Okay, so and our data model can also be extended further using DAX. That's the programming language in Power BI, or M in Power Query. They're two different languages. I think M is slightly more complex, but DAX, although it looks easy when you first start it does have a depth of complexity. So when we first start with Power BI, we tend to use DAX at a very introductory level, and then as we get more confident, we'll then move on. So with our DAX, we'd create calculated columns or tables or measures. Okay, and we'll see some of those as well. So with the data model, so Power BI will automatically join two tables if there's a column in both with the same name, and if the data type is the same. So it checks that first of all to make sure that the criteria is met. If it doesn't happen, then it's up to us. We can either drag and drop it, or there is a dialog where we can connect them up as well. But not all tables need to be connected. Sometimes we might have a table it doesn't need to be connected to the actual data model. We're just using it for data. So not every single table needs to be connected. Okay, cool. Okay, so and also I've been talking about primary key and foreign key. So customer ID may be in the customers table, and in the orders table, we need to know which order that customer has made. So that customer ID will be in the orders table. And that's how we join it. That's the relationship we make, customer ID to customer ID. But sometimes you get data that doesn't have primary key and foreign key. And how do we handle that? Well, if the data types are the same and joining the columns makes sense, like for instance, you might have city in your customers data. In a spreadsheet, you might have something which is city as well. And as long as in one of the data sources is unique, then we can join those both together. And we can join them by using something that, well, when you join them, use something called cardinality. So one to many or many to one is the recommended relationship between the two. So my one customer places many orders. Okay, so that's one to many. And that's a good scenario for an organization. Okay, so one customer places many orders. And that is the recommended relationship. There are a couple others, one to one and many to many. But to begin with, stick to one to many or many to one. And we'll see those very shortly. The cross filter. So this is the other aspect of the model. Oops, what happened there? That went on. Sorry, I must have clicked there. So let me just zoom in on this. So where you see those single cross filter and both cross filter, the single cross filter is recommended by Microsoft. That means that when we click on customers, it filters the orders so we can see how many orders each customer has made. Let me zoom out again. Okay. So that's a single cross filter and both cross filter. All right. That's those little arrows in there. So single cross filtering is recommended by Microsoft. So let's do a quick demo of the data model. Let me go back to share. We've got 4 tables here, so I'm just going to put my customer's information on there, and I'll choose customer ID, and it will create a nice little table. Okay, so we'll come back and have a look at that in a second. And let's go to orders. We've got some data in there. Let's go to, in fact, order details is where I want to go. Okay, so I've got here discount, my order ID, product ID, quantity, and unit price. So let's have a look at quantity. So if I bring that over to here, okay, so let me zoom in on that. So if we have a look at that, it says that all of our customers have brought in the same quantity and that the total of it's all the same as well. So there's obviously an issue there. And that's leading me into looking at the data model. Okay, it's a very simplistic problem that's being viewed there. But this is my data model. So you can see that I put my cursor over the line. We joined our customer ID from customers to orders, but I haven't got any join in here. Okay, but I've got an order ID here and I've got order here. And that's because they weren't named the same. And that's not unusual when you get data from different sources or even the same worksheet. Okay, you often get different names. So all I've done is I've dragged from one to the other. And I'll do the same with product ID. Okay, so we've got product ID here and we've got my product key here. So again, let's join these up. So now that we've got a good data model for these four tables, okay, and I'll just show you, this one is a one-to-many. So one product is in many order details. If I come across to customer, we've got a one-to-many. So one customer places many orders. Now those are both good scenarios. So let's go back to here and we now see that we've got the proper numbers coming in. We don't know what the numbers are, but they certainly make much more sense than what we saw earlier. So the reason we got those bad numbers is because it didn't know how to get across to quantity. How do I get across to quantity? There's no joins. So let me just go back to here, briefly mention, for those of you who don't have a database background, in my customers table, customer ID is unique for each customer. In my orders table, order is unique for each order, but I need to know what customer placed what order. Okay, so in the orders table, there'll be multiple customer IDs for each customer because we want many purchases by that customer. Okay, and then order takes me across to order details and product ID takes me across to products. Okay, so let me just minimize that. And let's go back to our slides. So that's how straightforward it is. You have to understand your data, obviously. So you have to know about your data. You have to know how it relates to each other. But you know, if you're using that data, you should have a good understanding of it. The next stage is visualizing. So I've loaded my data, I've transformed it, I've made sure my data model's good. I might have added a couple of columns in there. So if we've got time, we'll go back and do a measure. Okay, but I think I'm running out of time anyway. But let me come to here and we'll just talk through this. So visualizing your data, this is where we're going to create our masterpiece. Now, Power BI has a number of inbuilt tools for accessibility. Microsoft are really big on accessibility just now, and that's something we should seriously not consider, something that we should do. And one of the great things is once you save your report, your dashboard up to the service or the server, Edge has a number of developer tools that allow you to check some accessibility features. So if you can have a look at that little drop down that I've got there, okay, so it says no emulation, blurred vision, and then there's a number of technical terms for visualizing problems. And so we could look at our report and use these to actually figure out if we've got good accessibility for people who might have, you know, perception issues. Okay, so that's a good thing to be able to do, and that's built into Edge. So the trick as well when you're visualizing is to use the simplest visual for the message you're trying to portray. So bar or column charts are good for categorical data, line charts for continuous data. We can use combination charts for multiple measures. Scatter charts are really good for visualizing the relationship between two sets of numeric fields. We used them a lot when I was in the military. So we had cost and reliability of items, and when you used a scatter chart, anything that was really expensive and unreliable would be one of our outliers, and we go back to the manufacturer and discuss that product with them. We've got the card to display single number or message. We've got pie charts and donut charts. I say try not to use any 3D charts. Don't use 3D charts. Okay. I won't go into it anymore, but they just cause problems. And Power BI does have a series of powerful AI visuals. Okay, so have a look at those. Key influences, decomposition tree. Q&A is pretty amazing, and smart narrative as well. So with Q&A, I can double click on my Power BI desktop and I can ask a question by typing. What are my total sales? What are my total sales by year? And it will build that for me. When I get the visualization I like, I can click on an icon and then it will just create that visualization. So it's pretty powerful. You saw me go into the format pane when we had the slicer on. I went in there and I changed it from vertical to horizontal. So if you ever want to change, or if you need to change the look and feel of your visual, it's the format pane. It's that roller, the format roller, format painter. Okay, so that's where we go in. There's manual search boxes. Okay. There's also lots of formatting options. So depending on the type of chart that you've got, you'll have an x-axis and a y-axis for bar charts. A cluster column chart has more format options than a stacked column chart. We've got analytics for multiple visualization types. Not all visuals have analytics. So, for instance, a table has no analytics. The map has no analytics. But the clustered column chart has more analytics than the stacked column chart. So, have a look and see what works for you and what doesn't. Okay, let's just go to the next slide. There's lots of visuals out there. So I've just mentioned at the bottom there's 5. Chiclet slicer is a more powerful slicer than built in. There's the histogram, there's a bullet visual, box and whisker, charticulator, which is a really, really powerful visual. Some of these custom visuals are free, some are not. They are star rated. And there's also a blue check mark next to the ones which shows that control is certified by the Power BI team. Okay, so another thing to understand, the last point is that your Power BI administrator can limit which visuals your organization can use. They can actually stop you using custom visuals, or they can give you a number of visuals that you're allowed to use. So let's have just a quick look at visualizing here. I'm not going to do too much. I'm going to just show you some of the visuals. So let me go back to my share and let me bring up my, which one do I want? Let's go for this one. This is the one with the data model. Okay, so we've got our visualization there. So what I'll do is, in order details, I'm going to just do a quick calculation. So right click, I've right clicked on the table name. I'm going to create a new measure. And I'm just going to call it line cost. It's one of the ones that I tend to use. You might have other names for it, like cost of goods sold or something like that. And that's just going to be quantity. Okay, so it's not coming up. So I'm going to choose order details. And I want order details quantity. Now, why is my quantity not coming up? This is annoying. Okay, let's try it. Quantity times. I'm having an issue here and I don't know why. Okay, I'll come back to that shortly. Let me do this in a different way. I've obviously done something wrong, but I don't know what that is. So let me do this. Let me do a new column. We're going to call it line cost again. Okay, there we go. I've got my quantity this time. Oh, I know what I did wrong. It's okay. quantity times, I'll show you in a second. And this wants to be unit price. Okay, so I'm creating a calculated column. Calculated column, it creates an entry for every single row in the table. Okay, so let's just press that and I'll show you what I mean. If I come back to this middle icon is for data. So I've now got line cost and it's for every single row in the column. Okay, I chose measure. I meant to do a calculated column. So I've now got line cost. So I'm going to create a bar chart. So click on line cost. Notice I clicked on the canvas. Okay, if I didn't click on the canvas, then it would just have put that data or that field into the table, which is fine. It might be what we want. Okay, so let me make this full screen. Okay, so there's my line cost. Okay, so now that I've got all these tables, I've got to know where my data is. So I'm coming down to order date. I'm going to select order date. Okay, so it then splits out by year. And if I open this up, we can see that order date has a date hierarchy. That date hierarchy has year, quarter, month, and day. These icons that have appeared at the top, I've just clicked on the down arrow. That allows me to drill down. So I can drill down through the years, to the quarters, to the months. Okay, and then I can view that. I can be working with the month. So that's a quick way down through the data by using that. If I just go back up, so what we saw there was the quarters. So that quarter one was for all the years. Month January was for all the Januaries. If I want to just see 97, I can click on it and it drills down. So now I'm seeing the quarter for that year. Okay, so let's go back up because I want to get back down to my months. I'm just going to show you one other thing. So back in, I think it was March, we got something called small multiples. See where it says small multiples? I'm going to drag year into it so you will see it. It's just here where my cursor is. I'm going to drop it in there. So what small multiples does is it then takes your data and breaks it down by the year. So we might be looking at our sales and somebody might say, well, how were the sales year on year? Well, you can see that we didn't have anything in the first half of 96 and we've not got any data for the last 7 months of 98. But we're seeing our data over 3 years. And if we had 8, 9, 12 years worth of data, we would get a scroll bar to allow us to scroll up and down through it. Okay. I just want to show you a couple of these. So I put my cursor over these. So this is the clustered column chart. Okay, if I want a clustered bar chart, I click on there and it will just change it to a bar chart. And it's happy with the small multiples. Let me remove small multiples just so we see the whole thing. Okay, you've obviously got your line chart here. We've got our scatter chart here. We've got our, let's get off that one just now. We've got our KPI. We've got a gauge. There's a card. So if I just come out of here, cards are really useful for just showing single bits of data. So that's exactly what's happened there, is that I have clicked on the card and I didn't mean to do that. Did it for effect. But if I do Control Z, it brings it back. So now I want to click on here and do the card. And then I can drag line cost onto there from order details. And now it tells me all the data that's in there. I'm just going to show you some of the other visuals. So let's go to get more visuals. I can see a question there, so I'll come to that in a second. So these are, there's lots of questions, but there's one that popped out there. So these are the custom visuals, the ones with the blue arrow. So let me zoom in on this. You've got the blue star with the white check mark in it. Those are the ones that have been checked by Microsoft. So this one, which says ValQ Collaborate, doesn't have that. So I would not use it because it hasn't been checked and tested by Microsoft. Okay, you do still get it's got 4 stars, so some people are using it, 7. Okay, process science, there's lots in there. And there's the chiclet slicer. So 208 people have said that that is a good slicer. Notice it's by Microsoft, so you know, it's there. They just can't show all of them in the tool. So let me just click on Chiclet Slicer. Okay, and we'll have a look at what we've got here. So I get an overview of it and it gives me information about it. So you can see you can have graphics on the buttons as well. I'll just get it. I'm not going to do anything much with it, but I just want to show you that it's going to appear here. And I can right click it and I can say pin it to visualization. So now it's part of my Power BI. Okay. These four here, so that is key influencers, that is decomposition tree, that is Q&A, and that's smart narrative. They are the artificial or the AI visuals. They're really powerful. Okay, let me drop down. So, in fact, let me bring that back up. There's a question about how do you get the for your actual cost, how do you get the pound sign? Well, let me click on line cost. I'll show you quickly to do this. So click on line cost. I then get a set of menus up here. So notice it says the format is of type currency. So I can drop that down and change its format. And I can drop this icon down and change the currency type. So because I chose it as a general type and my laptop is set up to UK, I get the sterling, pound sterling. If I chose general and I had it set for the US, I would get dollar. But maybe I want euro, so for whatever reason. So we can then select euro and let it do its stuff. Okay. Same with dates. You can format dates. So remember I said you change your data type in Power Query, you change your formatting in Power BI. Okay. Okay, so let me drop this down. And let's do the last few slides. Okay, sharing and collaboration. Yeah, I've mentioned the service in the cloud. I've mentioned the Power BI server. I'm just going to come back to my screen. I'm going to zoom in. So you see I've got two Power BI desktops. There's one, the one that's not got the blue background, it's got RS. That is for report server. It's versioned for the version of report server I've got installed. Okay, so they have to match by version. And you can use the Power BI desktop, but you may use some of the capability that the Power BI server doesn't have. So that's why we use the Power BI RS version of desktop with the server. And when you download Power BI server to install it, you download the Power BI desktop and then distribute it to the people who need it. So let me go back out here. And then we've got the service. Okay, so the best way to describe this is to just do a quick demo. So let me do that. Just take a few minutes and then we'll stop. So let me let's go back to Power BI. Okay, I've got a few little slides here, a few little reports, I should say. So if I go to publish, this is me saying I want to publish it to the service. Okay, it does need to be saved. So just call it test one. It insists on it being saved. Okay, and now I can choose, let me choose webinar one. Click on select. It's now publishing it up to the cloud, and I just want to show you a couple of things, and then that'll be this demo done. Okay, so if I click on got it, I can also go to here and go to my Power BI service this way. Let me just open it up, choose my account. Hopefully I don't have to do anything else. I do have a bit of security on it, but that's fine. So let's go to webinar one. So what it's saved up is it saved a data set, and that's the data I've connected to, and it's saved a report. So if I click on my report, so there's my two that I created. Okay, there's the table, there's the actual, in this case it's a bar chart. I can edit it if I want, and you'll see it looks like desktop, but I'm actually in Edge. And let me close this up so we can see it a bit better. I'll close fields up so we see it a little bit more. And then I could actually say, okay, I didn't want that one. I want it to be a column or whatever else I want to do. I can add more data to it. I can create pages. I can yeah, as I said, I can pull in more data, I can add more visuals, I can do what I want to do, and then I can save it back as well. I can give people access to my workspaces, I can give people access to my reports and access to my dashboards. Okay, so let me come back to here and okay, so that was the demo of the Power BI service. I do actually have the server here because I have a server on my laptop. I administer a few servers, but you just have to know that it is actually Power BI. Well, it's like SSRS. That's what it looks and feels like. You need an administrator for it because you have to give people security access to your reports. You can have it, just by default, so it gives everybody access, but of course that's not always what we want. So that's the server. I'm not going to wait till it loads up its data. I'm going to just minimize it because I've got a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so let's just see if something pops up really quick. Here it comes. Okay. So there it is. It's just some COVID information at a point in time. It's not recent data. So we've got 103 million new cases, 2 million new deaths. That was a long, long time ago. And that's where they were all scattered around the world. Okay. So it looks and feels the same, but you don't get all that capability. Right. Back to the demo. Let's move along a bit. So the five stages we've just talked about shouldn't be considered to be linear. They should be non-linear, and it probably is more accurate to show them in a loop because we would iterate around this loop until our users were happy or until we were happy. And of course, we might just need to update our visuals, update our reports or our dashboards as we go through different um, phases of our company. Okay. So now we're at the webcast wrap up. I think I hand back to Darby. Oh no, I've got to cover this. Yeah, sorry. These are the courses in the Learning Tree Power BI curriculum. So at the top we've got 1360 Introduction to Power BI. That's the course I wrote, 3-day introduction. We've then got some other courses. So here we've got a analyzing data with Power BI. So that's DA 100, which is a 4-day course. That leads you into the Microsoft exam for data analyst. We've got the 1-day Power BI dashboard, Power BI paginated reports in a day. We've got a couple coming soon, so hands-on dashboard training, so that's a 2-day foundation. And then we've got some advanced courses, got some administrator courses and a developer course. And then we've got Power BI DAX in a day as well. So there's a really rich curriculum of training that Learning Tree provide in Power BI. Okay, so I do hand this over to Darby now.
Thanks so much, John. And thank you again to everyone who has stuck around and appreciate all the questions as well. I'm going to try and breeze through this really quick. I know several people have asked, but for those of you that have already participated in webinars or classes through Learning Tree, you will be able to access this webinar on your My Learning Tree account. And for anyone who is new to Learning Tree, you also have a My Learning Tree account just by registering for this webinar. So in the next few days, you'll actually receive a follow-up email with details on how to activate your account and get access to this and other webinars, as well as great assets such as skills assessments and questions in our e-catalog. So that will be available for you. John, so some of the questions that, and I'll put it looks like we have some resources up here. I'll leave those here as well. But a couple of the questions that I'll just breeze through real quick. The difference between distinct and unique, and that was early on in your presentation
Okay,
that question was asked.
yeah, I know where that was. That would be when I was doing the profiling. So distinct and unique. So unique means there's one of them, but distinct means there's many of them, and it's actually then just showing them as one. So for instance, if I had
Okay.
a customer called, say there was a customer called Aston, and they were there 5 times, then we had a customer called Learning Tree, and they were there 20 times. So if I then do a distinct on those, I would get Aston and Learning Tree, but if there's only one of them, then they're unique. So it's if
Okay.
Lemon Tree had 20. If they only had one, they'd be unique. Okay, so that's the difference between the two.
Okay. All right. And then Kate asked a couple of questions, and I did talk about the DAX in a day that we're going to be bringing up, so I'm going to skip over that question. But she also asked, is there is there no remove nulls option for a given field like in Tableau Prep Builder?
You can remove nulls, yes. Obviously, I've not been able to go through the whole of what's available, but yeah, we can remove nulls, we can fill data in as well. So there is another demo that I do in 1360 where we do a bit more work with an Excel report, and we have nulls and blanks and we fill those in as we go along. Yeah, so yes, you can.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then Jack asked a couple questions as well. The first one, are plugins available to automate any of the visualization process?
Okay, so what I take from that is can you have it build automatically? And what you can have is you can actually Microsoft provide an API, so that's an application programmer's interface, and you can use that in say a .NET application, and then you could automate that yourself. And it is something that I did for a customer, not with Power BI, but with a resource that's similar to Power BI, where they wanted their data and they wanted their users to be able to view something that looked like a bar chart, but then also be able to create their own. So you would do that with the API. I've not used the API. I've not done developer type work with Power BI, but I know it can be done.
Okay. And then you got to Roddy's question about currency showing. You answered that. And somebody had asked, is the Power BI web free too? Is it Power BI free on the web?
No, it's just desktop that's free. So the web version is what you pay for. But I think it's reasonably priced. Obviously, for if you were just using it casually, then you might not pay $10 a month. But it's $9.99 a month per user. So if you've got a small user base, that's relatively cheap. If you have a big user base, then you can buy licenses in bulk. Um, but yeah, $9.99. So Power BI Desktop is free, but the web isn't, and neither is Power BI Server.
Okay. And Katie is asking, where would you start if you wanted to connect Power BI with Microsoft Azure?
Okay, it's so Microsoft Azure. If you were using Azure SQL, they've changed the names recently, but it used to be SQL Server in the cloud, I'll call it, or any other database in the cloud. It will connect up natively. It's already there. You just have to use the connection and connect up. So yeah, I don't have one available for me to connect to right now, but I could quite easily do it just by clicking on Azure. In fact, I'm not going to connect up because ad hoc demos are always dangerous. But what I'm going to show you is if I come to get data and I come down, if I open them all up, so I'm just opening up the dialog, the get data dialog. Okay, so here we've got Azure. And these are all the Azure objects that it will connect up to natively without doing anything. Azure SQL Database, Data Warehouse, etc. Okay, so it will connect up to those very easily, very straightforward. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks for showing that demo. And then Jack is asking, and I'm going to end with this question because we are 23 minutes over, but what courses would you recommend for Learning Tree to build a commercial dashboard, searchable by client, supplier, spend, etc.? And I'll go back to this screen
Okay.
um,
So
if we have
obviously
that line up.
I'm going to big up the 1360. I'm the author of the course, and for me, I've built that course in a way that I think all Power BI analysts need to begin. And it takes you up to, it's an introduction course, but it takes you up to high intermediate. So that would be a great start. There, and we also do dashboards in there as well. So you might get enough out of that course for a start. But then we've got the one that's coming soon, the Power BI hands-on dashboard training. I know that's a 2-day dashboard training course. Uh, I've not seen all of the content yet, but I know that's going to be pretty powerful. So that would be a great addition to 1360. If you wanted the Microsoft certification, then you would do 8574, the second one in the list, which is DA100. But you might think about doing the introduction course before that. It all depends on whether your organization would allow you to have, that many days training. I feel DA100 has some quite advanced points in it. So because it is driven towards the
Yeah.
certification. Okay.
Right, and it is intermediate. Yeah, and the main difference with the new 2-day dashboard in a day, and this is the one that I had mentioned earlier in the chat that Virginia is writing for us, but the difference between that and the dashboard in a day is that it allows you to actually do the hands-on exercises versus mostly the demos that you get in the dashboard in a day. So they're very similar courses, but that's perfect. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for all the questions. And again, thank you everyone for your patience. And we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you all in some training soon and future webinars as well. Thank you, John, for your time.
You're welcome. And if you take the questions, I'll try and answer some of them later on.
Wonderful. We'll save those questions and I'll get those over to you.
Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.